Good to have you with us on a Monday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're beginning a new week as well as a new month. Happy July. And this is expected to be a consequential day at the Supreme Court.
The High Court is set to issue its final decisions of this term starting at 10 a.m. Eastern today. The biggest case we are waiting on, whether former President Trump can claim immunity from prosecution on charges that he tried to overturn the 2020 election. The Supreme Court heard this case back in late April. Mr. Trump has claimed he can't be criminally charged in the federal election interference case, which is being led by special counsel Jack Smith. His alleged efforts to try and stop the transfer of power after the 2020 election culminated with the January 6th attack on the Capitol. For more on what we can expect today, we're joined by NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Good morning to both of you. Ryan, let's start with you. So set the stage for us. What can we expect today at the Supreme Court? And walk us through this case involving the former president and how we got here.
Sure. This is really the big one, the Trump immunity case, right? So this all started when Donald Trump was charged in August of 2023. At that point, Judge Chutkan set along an itinerary for the case, setting a trial date in early March. Obviously, that never happened, or otherwise we would be in a scenario right now where we would already have a verdict in this case. Instead, what happened was it went through a series of appeals with Donald Trump's team arguing that he had total immunity, that he couldn't be charged with any crime because of his stature as a former president. That all the actions that he took were part of his duties. But ultimately, what's likely to happen with this case is the Supreme Court will give some sort of instruction about what actions can be considered official actions and what should be considered personal conduct and shouldn't be charged as part of the indictment, which could potentially delay this case more. Of course, they could also decide that he has total immunity, that this case can't go forward at all. But based on the oral arguments, you look that they would be going in that other potential direction. So we're going to see how this case unfolds at 10 a.m. and get those instructions. And then from there, it'll be decided what trajectory this course is on from there. There were about 3 months or 88 days left in the original preparation for this case. So that's sort of the timeline that you're looking at. But those instructions could have essentially forced this case to go out even longer. And, you're not very likely looking at a trial before the election at the point, Joe.
Danny, let's bring you in here and have some more reminders about those oral arguments, because this case was heard more than 2 months ago. So we know the justices had expressed concern about whether certain presidential acts should be off limits. Remind us what we heard in court that day and how that factors into the decision we get today.
From oral argument, we can guess that two things will not happen. There will not be a Supreme Court decision granting an ex-president absolute immunity in all circumstances. And on the other end of the spectrum, we will not get a court opinion that says there is no immunity whatsoever, ever, which is really what the lower court concluded. So very good chance that whatever the lower court decided will not stand. That will be overturned to some degree, and there will be an answer somewhere in the middle. And the reason I say that is that even the parties themselves were not arguing for those extremes. The government conceded that there are some protections for core constitutional presidential functions. And then on the other hand, Trump, his defense team, conceded that for purely private conduct, there is no immunity. So expect something somewhere in the middle. The challenge is that middle is a gigantic middle with lots of different possibilities. And no matter what, the lower court judges, including Judge Chutkan, must know that some work is likely coming their way, because in all likelihood, the case is probably going to get sent back down for further proceedings.
So, Danny, keeping all that in mind, simply put, what do you think the Supreme Court was tasked with determining here? Is it as simple as differentiating presidential acts versus personal ones?
The Supreme Court was tasked with determining something very different than what the parties wanted the court to do, because the parties are only concerned about their own facts, the underlying indictment and the facts in that indictment. That's all Trump cares about. He doesn't care about the future, and that's pretty typical for a criminal defendant. On his facts, he wants immunity. But as Justice Gorsuch correctly put it at oral argument, you folks may be worried about your own facts, but this is a decision for the ages. The court's obligation goes beyond these specific facts. They have to figure out what I think is maybe one of the thorniest questions of our era. To what degree does a president, an ex-president, enjoy immunity for his official conduct. And then, of course, the second question is, what in the world is official conduct? Because you can imagine virtually any official act taken by a president, as purely official as it sounds, pardons, vetoes, appointments, but it could be done with a corrupt purpose. For example, a pardon for a bag of cash. How do you deal with that? That's a core presidential function, but a bribe is obviously something illegal. And all these things came up at oral argument. And really, it's a tricky decision either way.
Ryan, when Supreme Court decisions are announced, they're reported on as quickly as we possibly can get on the air with them. But one of the ways that information had long been received traditionally was interns, literally from places like NBC, from news organizations. We're seen running down the steps of the Supreme Court, but times have sort of changed. Walk us through what happens now, how this goes down when we get a decision like this potentially later this morning. How do reporters go about making sense of what can be this super dense language so quickly?
Yeah, this is really about refreshing instead of having the jet outside at this point. I remember, covering those cases very early on in my career when there was all of this pressure, right? People had running shoes on. People would be inside and they would grab that document and run it out to someone like, Pete Williams, who was covering the Supreme Court for us for NBC at that point. So it's really just this fascinating set of circumstances where technology has changed this. And it's been a little bit of a change on the oral arguments, too, because, a lot of the stuff that happened during COVID, they couldn't handle these cases traditionally, obviously, when people couldn't be together. So you ended up with a lot more oral arguments, live streaming arguments than you did before. And I really think that sort of holds, the court kicking and screaming into the 21st century, because a lot of their approaches to this were pretty outdated.
But it was our version of the Olympics, so you have that. All
Running of the interns.
Ryan and Danny, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Yes, we do. All right, political allies of President Biden spent the weekend defending him from the widespread criticism he received for his shaky performance in last week's debate against former President Trump.
The public and private shows of support for the president come amid calls from some within the Democratic Party for him to step aside. Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker discussed the issue with Georgia Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock. Take a listen.
Hello there, Joe and Savannah. This week on Meet the Press, I spoke with Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia about President Biden's debate performance and calls from within the party for him to step aside. Senator, I hear you saying, look, this was a bad performance, but a lot of Democrats are saying, boy, it was more than that. It raised real concerns about his readiness, his ability to serve another 4 years. What was your reaction when you saw him struggling to complete sentences?
Well, listen, if they weren't engaged in a little bit of hand-wringing, they wouldn't be Democrats. And again, maybe it's because I preach every Sunday. Their bad debates happen, as President Obama has said. And this was 90 minutes. But let me tell you about that 90 minutes. Donald Trump lied the entire 90 minutes. One analysis said that he told about 30 lies. I'm not real good in math, but I think that's about a lie every 90 seconds. That's real talent. That means that whenever his mouth was moving, he was lying. And we can't have somebody like that in the Oval Office. That's not a talent we need leading the free world. And so Joe Biden has demonstrated, not over 90 minutes, but over the last 4 years, the character and the mettle of the man that he is. And he has demonstrated this both in his public service and in his personal life. His is a life of public service, baptized in sorrow, and it is why you feel his sense of care when you're with him. And it's our job. Democracy is a group project. It's our job to make sure that Donald Trump gets nowhere near the Oval Office.
You can see my full interview and a lot more at meetthepress.com. You can also get more Meet the Press here on NBC News Now every weekday at 4 p.m.
All right, Kristen, thank you.
Yeah, let's stay on this with NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, good morning. So we understand President Biden's campaign team endured a pretty tense call with about 40 of his top financial donors over the weekend. Tell us about those conversations. What is he hearing from those donors? Also, what's he hearing from his family?
These have been pretty consistent conversations, Savannah and Joe, since that dismal debate performance on Thursday, where many senior campaign staff have sort of had to field these calls from those anxious donors saying, what's going to happen next? Are you guys having serious discussions about the president's potential future here and path? And essentially what we're reporting now that's new is that yesterday, one of the key senior leaders of the campaign, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, did hold this call with skittish, somewhat frightened donors, where she actually laid out the mechanics of what it would look like from the apparatus of the campaign's war chest if it were decided, and there are no indications at this point that this is what's going to happen, but if for some reason Joe Biden decided he wanted to step aside and not be the nominee, then ultimately what the campaign is describing here is that much of what is already in place, all of those millions and millions of dollars that have been raised, would go to Vice President Kamala Harris. And again, they're saying that this isn't what they're planning for, but in response to questions about what if and how would we respond to this and how would this work, they are describing that really the scenario would be really messy. That is what they're calling it, and also impractical. Now, on the flip side, when you ask about the president's family, look, these are the people that he turns to time and time again during the most consequential moments of his life, and that he trusts more than any of his aides and advisors who have also been with him for decades. And we know that they huddled this weekend at Camp David in a pre-planned trip, but it of course took on new meaning and significance because they ended up talking about the debate issues and what to do next. And the family, I'm told, is really urging him to stay in the race and to, quote, keep fighting.
So, Monica, I mean, we know many Democratic leaders are publicly showing their support for the president. But the big question ultimately is, what do voters think? We do have the new CBS YouGov poll taken in the days following the debate. It showed 72% of registered voters said President Biden should not be running in this election. How is the Biden campaign responding to all this skepticism about his run? And you mentioned the war chest. How's it affecting grassroots fundraising now?
Well, they are trying to tout that there have been millions, more than $30 million that have come in, some of that grassroots, some of that from fundraisers that were on the books for the end of the quarter push, and as well as a post-debate. They hoped they'd have some momentum to keep raising money, that instead, during these fundraisers, there were some awkward moments where, again, donors had been asking questions about what happened there and what's going to happen next. But they are pointing to the fact that in terms of the president's supporters, people who have donated before, but also some new people who are coming to donate for the first time, they feel like that was a positive sign in terms of the response there. Overall, when we look at the polls and we look at this snapshot of where the race is, what we're told by those close to the campaign and to the White House is that essentially they're going to wait for more data and for more polling to make decisions about what could happen here in the future, that they feel that right now it's an incomplete snapshot. They need to wait a couple of weeks, get more information before making any decisions. But as one person told us for the story that we posted last night, this is going to be driven more by data than by emotion. Savannah and Joe.
Monica Alba, thank you very much.
With all his appeals exhausted, former top Trump advisor Steve Bannon is set to report to federal prison today. He'll serve a 4-month sentence for defying subpoenas from the House January 6th committee. Over the weekend, Bannon remained defiant, defending the actions that have led to his prison sentence. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard spoke with him, pressing him on his refusal to not appear before Congress.
We're clearly at a political war in this country.
Just before he reports to federal prison, one-time top strategist for former President Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, remains defiant.
We only get stronger with this. We're not going to get weaker. We're a populist movement.
After leaving his position as chief White House strategist less than 7 months into the Trump administration, Bannon went back to his roots in conservative media.
It's Saturday, 29 June, the year of our Lord 2024. You're in the War Room.
Launching an online program he calls War Room, which has rocketed in popularity among the MAGA faithful.
He's went ahead and ignited a bunch of fires under a lot of people, including myself.
Mr. Bannon refused to testify.
But his refusal to comply with the congressional investigation of the January 6th Capitol attack and alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election led to Bannon's conviction by a jury on 2 counts of contempt of Congress. The Supreme Court now refusing to delay Bannon's 4-month sentence as he appeals.
Why refuse to comply with the congressional subpoena?
Because first off, my lawyer told me when I got the letter of exerting executive privilege from the president, the J6 committee was not legitimately structured. So therefore, their subpoenas don't mean anything.
No court has so far agreed with those objections. The January 6th committee's interest in Bannon stemming in part from White House records showing he talked to President Trump twice on January 6th, as well as the day before, the same day Bannon said this.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. All I can say is strap in. There were personal and private conversations that he's exerted executive privilege on.
Bannon, who speaks regularly around the country,
are you prepared to leave it all on the battlefield?
Says even in prison, his message won't be silenced.
What is your end game?
Victory or death of this republic. If we don't win, first of all, they shred the Constitution. It is the death of the constitutional American republic we know.
And Von Hilliard joins us now with more on this. So, Von, clearly he remains defiant, but the question is, how is he really feeling knowing the reality that he's going to have to go to prison today? Is that sinking in?
Right. He thought that he was going to be avoiding this prison sentence or at least having it delayed until well after the election because he has this podcast that he does a daily recording of. But for him, and I think that this is sort of reflected in Donald Trump's own voice about retribution and about going and taking on those who have prosecuted them before. This is him as part of our interview explaining.
But I'm comfortable. If my going to prison is what it took to wake up the House leadership to say we got to get on top of this J6 thing, and now you're seeing some action, including maybe a vote on inherent contempt, where the House itself could actually arrest the Attorney General, and that is being bandied about. If my going to prison is what initiates that, then I'll serve the 4 months and know I've done a duty.
He's going to prison because he defied the congressional subpoena from the January 6th Select Committee. And so what he is doing is suggesting there is that current Republican House leadership should go back and essentially null all of the work of that committee and in turn go and investigate the investigators, but also including Attorney General Merrick Garland. It is deeply layered, but this is somebody who is going to prison and who is clearly looking at retribution.
So he says, though, still, right, that he's not done fighting to overturn his conviction. What's left as options? Could something like that actually happen? Is there any avenue?
Right. Let's be very clear. This is how the justice system works. He has been appealing this for 2 years now here. And so for Steve Bannon, there was the Supreme Court of the United States with a major conservative lean to it that told him just last week, no, you've got to go to prison, that while you go through your continued appeals here, we are not going to keep you out. And so for him, this is a tough road ahead, and this is how the justice system works, and he's going to prison.
Of course, he remains a staunch supporter of former President Trump. How does he feel about this campaign?
He feels like Donald Trump is going to win in November. I want to let you just listen to part of how that happens.
All the people who made the decision, it's getting out the vote. Just get the message. The same messaging you've got, and right now it's 3 verticals, right? It's seal the border, start the mass deportations to stop the illegal alien invasion, number one.
This is for Steve Bannon, part of his argument that for all the concern that Republicans and even Democrats have about those independent voters in the country, Steve Bannon, who has become a leading voice of the MAGA movement, makes a major case that there are enough Trump supporters out there. It's just turning them into Trump voters. And that the base alone, you don't need to go placate the middle. You don't need to try to win over the independent swing voters, but that Donald Trump and the MAGA movement should focus on turning out those who are riled up by issues like undocumented immigrants.
Got it. All right. Von, thank you so much for your interview. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us live. Well, if things feel a little quiet around the office this week, it's probably because the 4th of July travel rush is on, and the TSA expects this could be one of their busiest weeks ever.
It's already off to a rough start, though. Major storms either delayed or canceled thousands of flights over the weekend, stranding travelers.
NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is at Miami International Airport. He joins us with the latest. Sam, good morning. Just how busy is the airport so far?
Yes, Savannah, Joe, good morning. Let's talk about the rough start that Joe just mentioned. Over the course of the weekend, some 8,000 flights delayed, 2,500 canceled within, into, or out of the United States, according to FlightAware. So that is a lot. As far as how busy things are at the moment here in Miami, picking up, and look at these numbers from the TSA, okay? Over the course of the last couple of weeks, they've registered 3 out of the 5 all-time screening days, basically since mid-June, which is telling you this is, in fact, a record holiday travel season, and it's going going to continue throughout the year with the highest projections right now from that agency. If you're traveling over the course of the next week, Sunday, July 7th, they are expecting to eclipse 3 million passengers in one day. That would be the highest mark, guys, in the history of the agency, documenting those figures.
Sam, there's a major storm churning in the Atlantic right now. It's Hurricane Beryl, Category 3. Yeah. How concerned are officials about this impacting travel?
Deeply concerned, Joe. So this was a Category 4 until this morning, but still, you're talking about the difference between 120-mile-an-hour sustained winds and 130, which it was 12 hours ago. And there's a number of islands there, the Windward Islands, that are really bracing right now for what's to come next. We're talking about St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, Barbados, the Barbados Prime Minister there talking about opening up shelters and also forcing businesses to close by 7 p.m. last night and warning people this is no joke. We haven't experienced a hurricane on this scale before, so it's expected to sweep through a cluster of those islands in the Caribbean and then continue onward. What that path might be, too early to say, but for all of these small island nations in the Caribbean, tourism and obviously infrastructure is a little bit vulnerable. Tourism is dependent upon all the people coming in. That is their livelihood, so I'm sure many of them right now holding their breath this morning, guys, as we see what happens.
Yeah, Sam, so we sort of have this, double problem going on when it comes to travel, right? There's the weather, which is sort of uncontrollable, leads to all those cancellations, and then just the sheer number of people, what that means that those security lines are going to look like. Just how bad should people be thinking this weekend could get? How prepared should people be to get to the airport early, to maybe have to think about different options to get home?
Sure. So we know, obviously, Savannah, that staffing has been a major problem beyond just the issues with the weather. We've seen a shortage of ATC workers. We've seen, in many cases, flight attendants and pilots, not being able to get your crews to the airport on time to be able to get your flight out. I mean, that's affected so many passengers. The good news in terms of these cluster of crowds is that there has been technology leveraged increasingly at airports across the country to get you through those security lines faster, where you basically just hand your ID, take a picture, and you just move on. Hopefully that'll help a little bit, but that's not going to necessarily be solved for all of the staffing issues that are plaguing airlines right now across the country.
Oof. All right, Sam Brock, thank you so much.
Let's get some more information on Hurricane Beryl. It is the first major hurricane of the Atlantic season and the earliest Category 4 Atlantic hurricane on record.
Oh, that's right. Powerful winds and flash flooding are expected to make landfall in the Windward Islands this morning and race across the Caribbean in the coming days. The National Hurricane Center says the impact could be life-threatening. We have Michelle Grossman here, as you can see on set, with the latest. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Yeah, this is a scenario that looks more like September as opposed to the first day of July. We have a major hurricane, was a Category 4 storm yesterday, now a Category 3 storm. We do expect it to strengthen once again into a Category 4 storm, so feeding off the really warm waters of the Atlantic and then eventually the Caribbean, now impacting portions of the Windward Islands. We are looking at the chance for life-threatening winds, life-threatening storm surge, and heavy, heavy rainfall, 3 to 6 inches of rain, up to 10 inches in some spots. That's going to cause some landslides, some mudslides, and some flash flooding. So here is the latest on Beryl. We're looking at the location, 120 miles east-southeast of Grenada. We're looking at winds at 120 miles per hour, and it's moving west at 20 miles per hour. So it's moving pretty quickly as it goes through the Atlantic and then eventually into the Caribbean. It's going to gain some strength once again. So we do have tropical alerts dotting the Windward Islands. We also have a tropical storm watch for Hispaniola, or parts of Hispaniola, where you see the yellow there. We're going to see Beryl move through the Caribbean over the next few days, again strengthening later today, early Tuesday, into a Category 4 storm, and then we're going to see it skirt south of Haiti, south of Cuba, but these effects could impact portions of those islands. Category 2 storm by 2 a.m. on Wednesday. Same story on Thursday, Friday, and then it's going to cross the Yucatan Peninsula. It'll weaken into a tropical storm, and then it'll make impact into portions of eastern Mexico. Now, that's the first story. The second story are those severe storms that Sam was kind of alluding to. We had a rough weekend in the east, looking really pleasant today. A whole different story in the northeast and mid-Atlantic. The bullseye for storms today will be in the northern high plains, into the northern Rockies, scattered downpours into parts of the southwest as well. We're looking at some really heavy rainfall along the Gulf Coast, also a flood risk into southeast, the parts of Florida, into the Carolinas as well, and heating up in the west. That's going to be a big story this week, too. We're looking at triple digits over the next few days, at least through Thursday. As far as the severe weather goes, we're looking at storm hazards today and tonight, with winds gusting up to 75 miles per hour, damaging hail an inch or larger, and a few tornadoes are possible, especially especially where you see that yellow shading. And then you notice the orange on Tuesday. That's an enhanced risk, 3 out of 5 on the scale. 7 million people at risk for the same scenarios, winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour, so not quite as strong as today. Damaging winds, also a few tornadoes are possible as well. So how will that impact travel today? Not too bad. Better than yesterday. We had the bullseye for all that weather in the Northeast. That really slowed things down. So we're looking at Denver, Miami today. And then tomorrow we could see some slowdowns tomorrow, too, in the Midwest. So we do have some days to get to, but we have some big stories. Beryl's a big story. It's a history-making storm this time of year.
Yeah, I know. And so early in the year.
So early.
Goodness. All right. Thank you, Michelle.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.